Good afternoon. I'm Laurence Sanford, Senior Analyst with the American Security Council Foundation. The American Security Council Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to the mission of educating and engaging Americans on the issues of national security, economic security, and moral leadership. Our motto is peace through strength. With me today is our guest, Colonel Pete McIllwain. He had a distinguished career with the CIA and U.S. Army, and he served during the beginning of the Afghan War when he was chief of base in Peshawar, Pakistan, which is right on the border of Afghanistan. So he had a bird's eye view of the developments going on, and when 9/11 took place, he became responsible for coordinating the CIA's operations with the U.S. Army Special Forces operations. In addition, we could spend a lot of time with Pete because he was in Berlin at the fall of the Berlin Wall, and he was involved in the Balkans, and he was involved in many other operations over his distinguished career. So, welcome, Pete.
Thank you, sir.
Glad you could make it. So,
Thank you.
So why don't you just tell us when you were in Pakistan at the beginning of 9/11? Where were you on 9/11? Everybody remembers where they were on 9/11.
When 9/11 happened, I was actually in Washington, D.C., and I ended up being part of the alternate command center for the United States for a few hours when CIA headquarters was evacuated. That's a whole nother story that we could spend a very interesting hour on. What Larry, you asked me to talk about today was Osama bin Laden and the beginning of America's war in Afghanistan. To begin with, let me say that this is an all too quick a summary about my personal experience with something that occurred 24 years ago and about which I have only memories. I didn't take any notes or have any anything like that to go by. So if I do not make certain things like exact dates and names with accuracy, let me apologize to you and the viewers in advance for any errors or omissions. The other thing is I'm going to mention some people's names. Many of these are CIA officers. I would not mention any of those names if they hadn't already appeared as such in various publications.
Okay.
So there's no, but and then there will be some other things where you will see that I have omitted naming names.
Okay.
For obvious reasons. Okay. I need to also say that this is my personal account from December 1998 until, well, I should start with saying that as far as I'm concerned, the Osama bin Laden and beginning of America's war in Afghanistan did not start after 9/11. It actually started in 1998. And I'm going to explain why I say that. From December 1998 until May 2001, I was the CIA's chief of base in Peshawar, Pakistan. In those days, that is, since the withdrawal of the Soviets from Afghanistan in defeat 10 years previously, that is 1989, and the closure of the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, the U.S. consulate in Peshawar and the CIA base were America's outpost, so to speak, for America's interests in Afghanistan. Okay, of course, since the Soviet departure, the various Afghan warlords had been unable to cooperate in forming a government in Kabul and began fighting among themselves. In 1996, one-eyed radical Islamic cleric named Mullah Omar began to organize his students, in other words, Talibs, into a force to bring order out of the warlords' chaos, first in Nangarhar province and then spreading to the capital, Kabul, with the help and assistance of the Pakistani Inter Services Intelligence, which is one of the villains in this piece, by the way. Then enter Osama bin Laden. With at least a little urging from CIA in Khartoum, in the summer of 1996, the leader there, Hassan al-Turabi, tossed out Osama bin Laden and his group of about 100 Al-Qaeda followers from Sudan. With Osama in the lead, they went to Afghanistan. First staying with Osama's old warlord from Soviet days, Yunus Khalis in Jalalabad, or Tarnak Farms near Jalalabad, which was Yunus's base. However, as Mullah Omar and the Taliban gained the upper hand and actually seized control of Kabul, Osama moved to Kandahar, where he sort of ingratiated himself with Omar to the extent that he even had one of his young daughters marry Omar. So that's the connection between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda from the very beginning, and why, when later on the U.S. approached, after 9/11, approached Mullah Omar and said, we need Osama bin Laden, give him up. And he said, not only no, but hell no. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Osama bin Laden opened some training camps, principally in the Jalalabad area and coast provinces, and later 5 more in other places. There were two significant developments. On February 22nd, 1998, Osama bin Laden issued a statement called a fatwa, or a religious pronouncement, entitled Jihad Against the Jews and Crusaders. At this time, bin Laden's fatwa was greeted with a combination of amusement and condescending derision by the so-called experts at both Department of Defense and the CIA. However, with the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, and the 9/11 Commission called it a serious declaration of war and a precursor of all that have followed.
Why would the CIA and Defense Department sort of poo-poo Osama bin Laden because he only had 100 followers, or he had no military, or why would they do that?
I have a friend that says that, first of all, those people were so-called analysts and so forth, and they were taken with a thing called imperial hubris.
I love that word, hubris. Yes.
They got it wrong.
Okay.
Then on
hubris, by the way, is unfounded arrogance. Is a good way to describe hubris.
Then August 7th, 1998, Al-Qaeda suicide bombers drove truck bombs into the U.S. embassies. Let's see. In Tanzania and Kenya, 224 people were killed, including 12 Americans and nearly 4,000 people were injured. My in-briefing with Gary Schroen, who was the chief of station in Islamabad when I got there in December '98, contains some interesting points. Among them, that Islamabad station's main operational focus was to the Pakistani nuclear weapons problem and festering war between Pakistan and India, which might go nuclear, while operations in Afghanistan were to be my focus in Peshawar, and to include keeping track of a Arab fellow named bin Laden and his organization called Al-Qaeda.
And again, the U.S. did not have an embassy in Kabul because
it had been closed down during the Soviet time, and it was not reopened because of the chaos with the warlords fighting each other after the Soviets left. To include one of the ISI's principal warlord clients, who is going to be mentioned later in this, actually brought up some artillery and shelled Kabul in those times. So in other words, it was chaos. So the consulate general in Peshawar sort of became the de facto embassy for Afghanistan in those days.
Okay.
Gary Schroen showed me a copy of a covert action memorandum. They're called Memorandum of Notification because they were notifying Congress. Signed by President Clinton, which was worded such that CIA could conduct operations which may result in bin Laden being killed. In other words, they call that a lethal finding. But only if it was incident to operations whose intended purpose was to capture bin Laden and bring him to justice. In other words, bin Laden declared war on America and followed up by killing American diplomats and other people. And our response was, let's just say, law enforcement oriented. I won't go into the details of operations involving the tracking of bin Laden, etc., during the ensuing 2.5 years, other than to mention, because of the angle of the Pakistani ISI and its relationship with bin Laden, an operation entitled Infinite Reach occurred. I was told that that President Clinton had rejected a proposal by Cofer Black, the the counter-terrorist center chief in the CIA in the wake of the East Africa bombings, and that CIA mount an operation to kill bin Laden outright using lethal direction by covert action paramilitary team from the CIA. But Clinton refused to sign the MON. Instead, he ordered a missile strike. One of the Afghan tribal assets of Peshawar base was in the Al-Qaeda training camp and in Khost, and was reporting real time on bin Laden's location. down to to which building he was sleeping in. 4 U.S. Navy ships and a submarine stationed in the Arabian Sea fired between 60 and 70 Tomahawk missiles. You know how much a Tomahawk missile costs each?
$500,000?
Over $1 million, I think.
Okay.
But anyway, Clinton shot a lot of fireworks there. Some were the 60 and 70 Tomahawk missiles, what we're talking about. Some were aimed at bin Laden and the camp and coast, and they were fired, by the way, in the time of launch was 9:20 at night, and they thought bin Laden was in the building there. Many more missiles were aimed at a thing called the Al-Shifa pharmaceutical factory that was owned by bin Laden in Khartoum, Sudan.
So the missiles were fired in Afghanistan and
yeah, you had 2 groups of missiles being fired by Navy ships. Some were launched into Afghanistan and some were launched into Sudan.
Oh, I remember the Sudan thing because and the U.S. ended up paying a lot of money to the owners of that.
Yeah, it was the owners behind. They thought it was owned by bin Laden.
Yeah.
And they thought it was somehow a nefarious ammunition factory, and it was a real legitimate pharmaceutical factory that wasn't owned by them.
Yeah. There's that hubris again.
There goes the hubris again. Exactly right. As the missiles fired into Afghanistan from the Arabian Sea, they would cross Pakistan province of Baluchistan and the northwest frontier of Pakistan, so that the State Department demanded that Pakistan be warned in advance. Therefore, the Chief of Station, Gary Schroen, went to the ISI director to inform him and thus Pakistan, but only after the missiles had actually been launched. However, the powers that be apparently did not anticipate that ISI would have his sat phone number and immediately called bin Laden by sat phone and told him that missiles were on the way and to get the hell out of there.
How long would it take for the missiles to get from the sea to where he was?
It was about 40-minute missile flight from launch to impact. Let's see. So that was, you might say, one of the, not the first time, but actually the second time that America missed bin Laden. He escaped with only a few minutes to spare. In addition to highlighting the relationship between bin Laden and the ISI, which may have years later played a role in bin Laden's escape from capture at Tora Bora, which I'll get to in a minute, later on in this presentation. And I also want to mention that our Afghan agent, who had reported bin Laden's presence at that camp, prompting the missile strike, was one of the 20 or so men at the camp that were killed in the strike. One of my first and saddest duties as chief of base was coordinating a salatium payment from the CIA for that man's widow.
It's a sad story.
So that's what you get sometime when you try to help America, I guess. Let's fast forward to September 2001. We all recall what happened on September 11th and who was responsible. As you might imagine, things were very busy at CIA headquarters, especially with Cofer Black, by now he was responsible for dealing with all the other agencies in Washington, meaning the White House and the DOD, while a man named Hank Crumpton was chief of the newly organized Counterterrorism Center Special Operations Branch, or CTCSO, which would be the organization actually running the CIA's end of the coming war. The CIA was frantically searching through the files of its operations officers, looking for the very few, who had useful languages such as Pashto, Urdu, or Dari. They found a few. The concept for teams to go into Afghanistan was very much like the Jedburghs teams that the OSS deployed in France to work with the French resistance in advance of D-Day. Essentially a 5-man team which would be deployed with cooperating tribal leaders, quote unquote. In other words, the warlords, who could be induced to flip on the Taliban and join the Northern Alliance. The team's first priority was to develop reporting on intelligence. Find bin Laden. Once the CIA team had been inserted and gave the okay to proceed, an Army Special Forces A team would be inserted to work alongside them with the tribal leader and provide assistance with ground combat operations, and especially to provide for calling in Air Force, Navy, and Marine bombers to provide air support. Therefore, in Afghanistan, an entirely new hybrid of war was born. Part conventional, part unconventional, part covert, part overt. How exactly was the CIA-led Pentagon augmented war, officially called Operation Enduring Freedom, going to work? About 20 September, I was called into the CIA Office of Military Affairs and asked to be the chief of a Clandestine Operations Liaison Team, the acronym COLT, C-O-L-T, which would deploy with, support, and coordinate CIA operations with a thing called Task Force Dagger, which was a Joint Special Operation Task Force North, to be established at a former Soviet air base in Karshi-Khanabad, Uzbekistan. Consequently, the COLT, consisting of the senior operations officer as chief, that would be me, an intelligence analyst, a logistics specialist, and a communications officer. That would be the initial team. Soon found itself on an aircraft going to Fort Campbell, where everyone was issued Army combat gear and a sidearm. And after introduction to the task force commander, Colonel John Mulholland, who was commander of the Army's 5th Special Forces Group, and the following morning, we got on a C-17 en route to Karshi-Khanabad, with a stopover for fuel in the Azores en route. On that C-17 was a lot of ammo, about my 5-man team, and about 20 Special Forces guys.
So
We had
to fly there, what airspace did you go over? I'm trying to visualize. So
went from the Azores. It went over the southern tip of Spain into the Mediterranean, through Turkey and east.
Okay. So you had to fly over Iran then?
No, we were just a little bit to the north of Iran, because Turkey's got a sort of a bulge this way, and Iran goes this way, and we were up here.
Okay. Okay.
So anyway, we went in. Okay. Task Force Dagger, by the way, consisted of 5th Special Forces Group, headquarters, and 2 of its 3 battalions, or the A-teams thereof. A squadron of Special Operations Chinooks and Black Hawk helicopters from the 160th Special Operations Regiment, called SOAR. 3 MC-130J Smoky gunships from the Air Force's 1st Special Operations Squadron. A company of infantry from the 4th Battalion, 31st Infantry, 10th Mountain Division, for providing security. Once on the ground, I found that I was also responsible for the care and feeding and direction, sort of. In other words, go find bin Laden, for the CIA air branch's only 2 Predator drones. One armed with Hellfire missiles, and the other crammed with advanced recon technology. Consequently, our small Colt team was augmented very quickly by 2 CIA paramilitary officers. One was from Air Branch, who was a pilot for an agency helicopter, which was soon provided to the team, and a ground branch contractor. This was the late Billy Waugh, who was a legendary figure in the Army Special Forces, as well as among CIA paramilitary officers. There's a couple of books about Billy out there if you want to read them. Billy was a great help for about 3 weeks, and then after Kabul fell to the Northern Alliance, he went to Kabul to join one of the CIA teams in the South. My role was, shall we say, multifaceted. I received CIA teams coming from the U.S. And briefed them prior to deployment with the warlords. My mission was to contact the warlords where necessary in order to induce them to flip. That is, to turn on the Taliban and agree to join the Northern Alliance. And that led to various things, like having to offer some guys money and actually get it to them, offer other guys weapons and so forth, and actually get it parachuted to them. It was kind of a big and complicated 10 days or so, getting all of that part of it organized. The first CIA team was led by Gary Schroen, and had already been deployed in the Panjshir Valley. Can we put the map up? Doop. Okay, the Panjshir Valley is right up in the very north. That's that green blob to the upper right-hand portion of your map.
Is that the Hindu Kush?
Well, the whole mountain range running down where the gray stuff is, that's the Hindu Kush between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Okay.
Hindu Kush, by the way, means death to Hindus. Which came from the British experience with the Indian Army trying to take Afghanistan 150 years ago.
Yeah, they get clobbered too.
Okay. First CIA team, led by Gary Schroen, was already deployed in the Panjshir Valley, north of Kabul, and was working with Muhammad Fahim. Muhammad Fahim took over after Ahmad Shah Massoud, called the Lion of the Panjshir, had been assassinated by Osama bin Laden's team, who was, it was just 2 days before 9/11, it was the 9th, I think, of September. They were, this team allegedly was from a Arabic news organization, Al Jazeera. They weren't really, but that's what they were claiming to be. And they were filming a interview with Massoud, and so they brought in all their camera gear, and guess what? It was a bomb. They blew them all up. But anyway, I knew Muhammad Fahim. It was really funny. Ahmad Shah Massoud thought of him as an idiot. Third guy on the left, little flunky. But suddenly after he was killed, there was nobody else around to talk to Gary Schroen. So he became the successor to Massoud. And a little later on, when the government of Afghanistan was formed, they began calling him Field Marshal.
Okay.
That's a way to get promoted, yeah. All right. This team was known as Jawbreaker and teamed up with an A team, ODA 555, or it became famous in the battle that follows as the Triple Nickel, for the advance on Kabul. Team Alpha deployed to the Darashuf Valley, south of Mazar Sharif. Can you put the map up again a second? Okay. Mazar Sharif is right in the center, about where the gray meets the tan, right up in the north center. And the Darashuf Valley is about where the light green stuff is, in the south there. Okay. The south of Mazar Sharif, and teamed up with General Abdul Rashid Dostum, whom I was responsible for recruiting and bringing into this game, along with ODA 595. This group gained fame for the remarkable 100-mile advance on horseback from Darashuf to seize Mazar Sharif, along the way destroying a significant part of the Taliban, who greatly outnumbered Dostum's tribal force and were vastly better armed, but they were totally destroyed thanks to American air power. Nothing like a B-52 strike to make your day. The Taliban was totally destroyed. ODA 595, call sign Tiger 2, were the ones calling in the airstrikes, and known thereafter as the horse soldiers. In addition to Team Alpha deployed through KKUZ, or Karshi-Khanabad, that's what we called it, KKUZ. By the Colt were Team Bravo, with a warlord called Muhammad Atta, east of Mazar. Team Charlie in the west at Herat, with warlord Ismail Khan, and Team Delta in Bamiyan province, where Al-Qaeda destroyed the ancient Buddha statues, you may remember. to fight alongside the Hazara tribe. They were a very interesting group to me. They were the only Shia Muslims in Afghanistan, and they claimed ancestry. In the north, Task Force Dagger, half of the operational area of Afghanistan, the results have been truly amazing. With only 3 teams deployed, Alpha, Bravo, and Jawbreaker, bombing kicked off on October 7th. And I must say that the most anxious people to get those teams in was the Secretary of Defense, who called Mulholland every personally. He said the next time, they asked, where the hell are they? Why aren't they your 18s and surgery? Why is the war beginning? He was on fire.
Who was that?
Big Bad Don. Mullah Sharif fell on November 10th. That's a little bit less than a month. We talked about the North Valley battles. The Northern Alliance captured Kabul on November 13th. That was 38 days. And essentially, special operations had flew the country. How many U.S. personnel were on the ground at Taliban were fleeing their capital of Kabul? By my count, it was 30 CIA officers and 120 Army and Air Force special operators, plus 15 British special boat squadron operators. That's all. Meanwhile, back in KKUZ, Colonel Mulholland set up a team to fly to the former Soviet air base Bagram to open it up as the principal U.S. base in Afghanistan. So you're in control.
So what is basically war?
It's a little bit more than the whole thing that I'm going to talk about here is 90 days.
Okay.
Only 90 days.
So we're up to 38 now.
Okay, so I'll turn over control temporarily to the analyst who didn't know a thing about operations. In order to accompany Mulholland, his deputy task force commander, the superbly capable Colonel Frank Kisner, USAF, took command of KKUZ. By the way, Frank was commander of the USAF 16th Special Operations Group at Hobart Field, Florida. And Frank retired from USAF in 2011 as lieutenant general. He was quite a guy. After a few hours on the ground at the Bagram getting things organized, I accompanied Mulholland and a task force deputation up to Kabul, where the Taliban were departing and the Northern Alliance celebrating their victory. Went to the U.S. Embassy where we raised the stars and stripes once again. Met the Afghan dispensary for the past 11 years it had been closed, and toured the facility, which was like a time capsule. There were even rotary phones on the desks. The North was fully in the hands of the Northern Alliance. By extension, the U.S. Army participating allies, which at this moment was only the British. With the backroom base open, KK uses no longer the key force. Among other things, CIA continued to deploy teams, but they were now flowing through backroom. Team Foxtrot, led by Wayne Edmonds, was south to occupy Team Hotel, mounted up in Toyota pickups with machine guns mounted and deployed to run to Jalalabad and later on to Fort Com, the gate of the Khyber Pass, to make sure that the Taliban were staying there. And Fort Com, of course, is the other side is the northwest frontier of Pakistan. Team Romeo, including Billy Watt, I talked about a little earlier, was surged by Shah in the Logar province, blocking the road from Kabul south east to the still remaining Taliban stronghold in Kandahar. And Team Juliet was deployed to Jalalabad and onward to Bin Laden's former stronghold called Tornat Farm that I talked about a little earlier. Team Echo, led by Greg Vogel, who replaced me as chief of police in Peshawar only 6 months earlier, by the way. He entered Afghanistan from south, that is Boldak, and linked up with Mohammed Shirzai, who was the principal agent that I've been handling for all those years. And Greg had the future president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, with him in tow, along with an H team from Task Force Dagger at KKUC. Their objective was to unseat Omar Kandahar and find Bin Laden, whom we believed was there with Omar. Unfortunately, the Taliban in the area were very strong and aggressive, which led to a desperate fight by Team Echo and the AC, in which there were several U.S. who were unfortunately wounded by misdirected bomb, which was dropped by a Marine F-18. And so I was involved with organizing a medevac, which required a Chinook flight of over 400 miles. Okay, everywhere the Taliban units were retreating and falling back on Kandahar. So where was Bin Laden? In November, the CIA Predator, that is the Predator drone, spotted him moving from Kandahar up the main highway toward Jalalabad. In other words, moving toward trouble, not fleeing, rather than fleeing Pakistan south or around the west. It was a large convoy, mostly pickup trucks. There were 3 black SUVs, which were Bin Laden and his party. While we watched through the Predator coverage, the convoy then stopped, and a tall, bearded man in a white robe and turban got out of the black SUV and proceeded to relieve himself. It was Bin Laden for sure. Unfortunately, the Predator we had up was not the armed one, so all we could do was watch. However, there was a Marine F-18 in the area, CIA drone were not sufficient. I was on a secure phone with CENTCOM in a second and talked to the Air Boss, the Air Force Lieutenant General, and his legal advisor, and arguing about to let us drop. But the general could be persuaded to forego the standing rules of engagement. And the lawyer said, how do you know it's really bin Laden? And you won't be given an innocent civilian. Okay, we got an obvious military convoy, and I'm looking at the guy on the video. Doesn't look like an innocent civilian. But anyway, that's the thing that happened in a time and place. So if you're keeping track, that's the second miss on getting bin Laden in the story.
Conversation.
Anyway, we watched how bin Laden convoy turned off the main road going west toward Spin Boldak. That's the White Mountains. It's kind of the south of the Cotton Pass. I recall back when bin Laden was supporting Habibi Islami and their chief, Yunus Khalid, the guy that worked at the Tarmac farms I talked about. Back in the war against the Soviets, bin Laden, using money and equipment from the CIA, had built Khalid a fortified cave complex in Spingar, which in Spingar called Tora Bora, or the Black Dot. I could not find it on the maps or the overhead imagery that we had at hand at KKUZ. However, I called Gary Burnson, the team ECHO chief, then in Jalalabad, to tell him bin Laden and a large group of probable Al-Qaeda Arabs had spotted southwest of Jalalabad, probably en route to making a stand in the hideout at Tora Bora in Spingar. SIGINT and overhead imagery later confirmed the location and their presence there. Chief Duke, that is, Gary Burnson team, had two just recruited tribal warlords. I wasn't responsible for that, but Gary was. Two tribal warlords on payroll from the Jalalabad area, Hazrat Ali and Muhammad Zaman. They were rivals, and Ali and Zaman were reputed to also hate each other immensely. Nevertheless, when he talked, and they agreed to support us against the Taliban and the Arabs. And given that we did not know how many fighters bin Laden had with him, potentially in a fortified position, Burnson decided to order both groups to move to Tora Bora. So there were about the two groups of together consisted of about 400 fighters. The ensuing battle at Tora Bora lasted 12 days, mostly heavy fighting against a large and well-valued force of Al-Qaeda fighters during the day and lulls after dark, because the Afghans, tribals, very poorly equipped anyway, simply would not fight at night. Consequently, the Arabs came out and fired during the night and cooked an evening meal, while we at we were able to do a head count every night and determine how many aircraft had been killed during the fight the previous day. So we were amusing ourselves with doing that.
So if you attack them at night around the campfire.
Well, as a matter of fact, there was a lot of bombing going on, and we did do some night bombing, but we did a lot of day bombing too. And but that was on the Soviet side. Over the 12 days of the battle, we heard Bin Laden on the radio speaking in Arabic, of course. So we knew he was still there. He was like KIA. And we were passing those reports along the area. Along about 8 December, it became clear to Gary that the Rennet tribes were probably not going to be able to finish the job. And they came from Delta Force. They came from Delta Force. U.S. Army Special Forces, as we don't know, was waiting at a Pakistani Air Force base nearby Baluchistan. They were helicoptered into hell. They were joined by some British special boat squadron commandos and some German SAS KSK, that's a mouthful, operators who had just arrived to there. In addition, the additional forces helped with the battle, but enemy size and range remained a problem. Overviewing the situation from the Tactical Operations Center of the KKUZ, Colonel Frank Hitler had an idea. He called the USAF Oman and asked, "Have you still got one of those blue 82s over there? We need one dropped in the hot ASAP." Blue 82 is also called the Moab, the mother of all bombs. It's a 15,000-pound monster bomb that is delivered by a parachute drug from the back of the C-130 Frankfurt bomber. Too big a bomb for a bomber. They called it it's a massive ordnance air an air blast, massive ordnance air blast bomb, or a Moab. But the soldiers, of course, called the mother of the bomb. The Moab was dropped on Peshawar on the night of 10 December. Although it's designed to be an air blast weapon and not a ground penetrator, from the infrared imagery of the strike, you could see large red blobs that were the bunkers, full of fire, and a spider web of red down the tunnels connecting all the bunkers. I don't know how many Al-Qaeda fighters survived this attack, but Bin Laden did. So because on the morning of the 10th, as I recall, he was on the radio telling the surviving people, and this is, I think I remember exactly this, but this is how I remember what he said on the radio, translated from Arabic. Our prayers have not been answered, and we did not get the support from the apostate nation that called themselves Muslim brothers. He was talking about the ISI, the Pakistani ISI, by the way. And things may have been, or things may have been different. I'm sorry for getting you involved in the battle. If you can no longer resist, you may surrender. That's my saying. So obviously, accepted without hearing Benson's okay. Clearly, this was a ploy to allow bin Laden and a small party to escape on horseback, using the mountain tracks up over the White Mountains behind Fort Mora and into Pakistan's tribal area, where bin Laden would have had a vehicle waiting for him to take him into hiding in Pakistan. That's exactly what happened. And the remaining Al-Qaeda fighters, I recall, less than 20, surrendered the next day. I'm aware that there are several versions of the story of who may have done what that led to bin Laden's escaping the trap toward Bora. In a nutshell, here is my version. Sometime around late December, the 8th day of the battle, John Mulholland and I were looking at the map of Peshawar with positions of friendly forces marked. Al-Qaeda positions were in the valley of mountain ridges on both sides. Their bunkers blocking the valley. And the tribal forces were arrayed in an open horseshoe like this, with Azra Ali's men on the left, on the north side, and Muhammad Zan's men on the right side of the south, while Team Juliet and special forces OEA were on two hills behind the tribe and positioned so to be able to view and call in airstrikes. We saw the back door of the hill routes to Pakistan was open. Damn, bin Laden is going to get away. I called their men to ask him to ask him to warn him. He said that he was aware and furious, but could not get the Afghans to move anybody around behind uphill to close the back door. Gary said he had been working on this for a couple of days without avail. John Mulholland said there was a Ranger company with Delta Pakistan Air Force Base in Baluchistan, with the rest of the Ranger Battalion in Oman ready for orders. John Mulholland called CENTCOM, described the situation, and said CIA is requesting a true deployment in assistance. Words to that effect. Silence for a good hour, 4 hours. Then the CENTCOM officer called to say, no, I do. Why not? The operation would be too high risk because the Rangers would have to be inserted by Chinook into potential high LZs, and there does not appear to be suitable LZs anyway. And no artillery fire support would be available, and the 3 platoons of Rangers would be too small a force to block all of the potential lances. And if attacked, there would be no reserve force to assist them. In other words, CENTCOM just didn't want to do it. Mulholland spoke briefly with, we called and spoke with General Tommy Franks, who said he was aware of the request to assist CIA, but it was too high risk and had been disapproved, quote unquote. Franks did not say who was doing the disapproving. I heard subsequently that it was really ASCF Sr who disapproved, and not Tommy one result of a brief pause or truce at the Battle of Peshawar, in addition to facilitating the escape of bin Laden, became counter to three escapes. This guy, man, bin Laden, they should have told Mr. Teflon, I think, was gave Mullah Omar and the Taliban fighters in the south of Mandar province sufficient time to cross unmolested into neighboring Balochistan province of Pakistan, from where, of course, and with the collusion and assistance of the Pakistani ISI in later years, the Taliban began their 20-year and ultimately successful insurgency. Thus, it may be said that December 13th, 2001 marked the end of the beginning of America's long and costly adventure in Afghanistan. That was the 90 days I was talking about. After that, there were the troop deployments into Afghanistan. Were on was but up until December 13th, there were just CIA and special operations forces. And by the way, they're not in uniform. Even all military guys were all wearing civilian clothes. When Tommy Franks was talking to me in early October, as things were getting rolling, Franks came into KKUD and wanted to know about General Dawson, and I got my secure radio and called Team Alpha and had him put Dawson on the radio with Tommy Franks. And two of them thought Dawson spoke very good Russian. Very good Bari. He's a really good guy. Anyway, one of the things that we talked about after that was the demand by the DOD fighters. They were, what was the word? Alarm was the term that was used, because the U.S. military people, like the CIA people, were all in civilian clothes in Afghanistan. And the DOD lawyers were saying, my God, that's a violation of the Geneva Convention. If captured, they will be executed as partisans. I was explaining to Tommy Franks, explaining to his lawyers to say earlier, you know who the enemy is here? You know that none of them know what the Geneva Convention is? If they did, they wouldn't care. The naivete and ignorance of many elements of the U.S. government going into this thing are just amazing. The other thing was talking about the uniform that I was talking to him about at that time was Don Rumsfeld was adamant about getting U.S. military forces, not special forces, but real uniform wearing guys into Afghanistan as soon as possible. He wanted a press release. America's there, forces are fighting. So they flew a Marine brigade into a thing called Objective Rhino, which was an airfield at the Arizona out in the howling desert in was, I said, you get some time general? And he said, yes. And I gave a little bit about a synopsis about the war thing, who they kind of were, and about what Afghanistan was in terms of its ethnic, religious, and makeup. And then I told him a little bit about history, and because I was concerned that we were going to have regular American forces flowing in. The original operations plan was that we were going to go after finding and killing Bin Laden. If we had to run over the Taliban to do that, okay, we would do that, but then we were going to leave. There was an exit plan all over. So but remember the thing that Hamid Karzai, the future president, was there. They wanted him installed as president. He went, Gary or Greg to give to a couple, and he was installed as president on the 13th of December, in the middle of all this. And, but anyway, back to the discussion with
installing heaters is not very good. It's something with Vietnam as an example. But come on, continue, please.
Tommy Franks. I gave him that synopsis, and then I took him through the British experience and the history of the British experience. And I told him that if we want to be successful in Afghanistan, we need to follow the hard lessons the British learned and their solution. I said, what's that? And I said, they finally, after two unsuccessful wars with a lot of men, they finally came to a solution called wagon load of gold. And what the wagon load of gold was, they were going to, they made a deal with the king of Afghanistan. It says, okay, if you will promise to do this list of 5 things, we will send you a wagon load of gold from India, from the Viceroy of India. Will send you a wagon load of gold every year. One of those things was, do not talk to or let the Russians come into Afghanistan. Another one was, do not allow the tribals to conduct ambushes in the Khyber Pass. There were 5 things on the list. But anyway, that was the end. The concept was, if they didn't do anything, if one of those things was found lacking, you reduce the amount of gold by that much. And what happened? Well, this allowed in the tribal nature of Afghanistan, it allowed the king funds to be able to buy off the loyalty of the different tribal chiefs, who would then be able to have funds to buy off their families and so forth. So that worked for almost 70 years. British learned, and so I was told that. So what should we do? Good years, what the Russian example? So, well, the Russian example was the exact opposite. They proceeded to do the same thing that the British had done twice before and lost. So I said, well, so what should we do, General? Is follow the wagon load of gold principle. And I mentioned 7 leaders. That America should just choose one. And I don't care which one you choose. They're all bad bastards. There is no good one. And but just choose one. Whatever criteria you want. But gone as the king of Afghanistan, if you will, that title we call it an emir. And arranged for the modern equivalent of the white gold, probably with many of the same precautions. To add one, which would be don't let the Arabs and Al-Qaeda back in here, and no fomenting of camps, which would be training people who would become terrorists.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
That's what we should do, General, and we should not be exploiting American military forces in uniform in any number of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Tommy Franks looked at me while we were sitting here, and he stared at me for a full minute without saying anything. He looked down at his legs. He looked back at me, and he said, "Pete, you don't understand. That isn't how the U.S. Army wages work."
Okay.
Well, I picked my jaw up off the floor. Okay, wow. So, that was bothering me years later. And I read Tommy Franks' book about the war, American Soldier. And in there, he's talking about his relationship with Rumsfeld. And he was talking about at the very beginning of 9/11, when the CIA was down with the president and giving him the concept of the CIA to lead this war and all of that. Rumsfeld was beating on Tommy Franks for essentially a war plan to put America's forces in Afghanistan without any regard for knowledge of the history or the ethnicity or any of those things. And in Tommy Franks' book, he talks about how Rumsfeld was literally beating on him every day before we got this. So when Tommy Franks was coming to see me and asking to talk to General Dawson, and we were sitting down, it was only a couple of days before that he delivered the war plan that Rumsfeld wanted to Rumsfeld. And here I was, in my ignorance of all of that, essentially telling him that he made a terrible mistake.
Right? So, I mean, it's just one in the second. Okay. Is he happy to say?
I'm going to end it this way. It might be said that December 13th was marked the end of the beginning of America's long and costly adventure in Afghanistan. Many remarkable, even fantastic things were accomplished by a very small number of America's special operations and intelligence officers in just 90 days. And I believe history will be very kind to the memory of those involved. Let's not forget, however, the stated objectives for Operation Enduring Freedom, as briefed by Cofer Black and approved by President George W. Bush, were: number one, find, capture, or kill Osama bin Laden; two, destroy Al-Qaeda; three, prevent the territory of Afghanistan from ever again being used as a launching pad for terrorist attack against the United States and its interests. I would ask you, with the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, how have we done?
back to square one and maybe war.
Yes, sir. There you go. That's all I have, sir.
I don't know what our listeners or viewers. I don't know if I want to hear more from you. There's other stories. It's the diversity of competency that we see in the knowledge. But anyhow, thank you, Pete, for that enlightening conversation. I appreciate it. So, you know, they'll have Pete's